Hi, everybody. This is the restart of our Drupal Atlantic meetups. We are starting a new format that we want to experiment with that gives us a bit more freedom to bring people in from around the Maritimes to participate and talk about Drupal and hopefully learn some stuff and participate. So after a little bit of a break from our last in-person meetup that we did early last year, we're starting back up. As part of this new format, we're also bringing in some people to host with us, and I'd like to introduce today Trevor Morse, based out of Halifax. Trevor.
Hi, Mike. How are you?
I'm pretty good.
So I am based out of Halifax. I work for a company called Chalk. We do a lot of sports information and data. A few number of sites that we use with Drupal. Head of development there.
Sounds pretty exciting. So you've been doing Drupal stuff a long time?
Day to day now as I was, but I've had involved with Drupal in what capacities for probably 5 or 6 years now. I have a group in Halifax that basis for on and off for a couple of years. So I'm hoping we can get some more stuff started, even if it's just in the Atlantic provinces.
Great, yeah. And for those who don't know me, my name is Mike O'Hara. I'm based out of Moncton, New Brunswick. I work for a company out of Fredericton called Blue Spurs Consulting. We do primarily AWS consulting, DevOps, architectural solutions, architectural work, that kind of fun stuff. I do primarily Drupal work as part of that, and we also do a lot of mobile development and some cool stuff there. I've been doing Drupal primarily since about 2000 and formatively 2011. Got really into it and Drupal 7 came out and kind of stuck with it ever since. So one of the cool things we're going to be doing as part of this little format is we're going to be doing some news stuff to start everything off. And we have a couple of news stories every month talking about the big stuff happening in Drupal. And without further ado, we'll get right into it. The first news story we'll be talking about is around the beginning of January 4th, Drupal 8.4.4 was released. Drupal 8.4 saw its most recent incremental release. It was a simple patch release with no features being added, but a number of bugs being squashed. Some of those highlights include string fixes to the config import core module, which interestingly enough, you wouldn't normally see string changes in a patch release. But since the text that was included before was simply just plain wrong, core contributor XJM opted to merge it into the 8.5 branch and backport to 8.4 for this release. We also saw a step closer to PHP 7.2 support with a fix for an issue with the count parameter. There was one more major blocker for full PHP 7.2 support that's expected to be released with version 8.5, which is due March 7th. This bug relates to a couple of examples of incompatible method declarations, which lead to fatal errors when encountered. Lastly, another important fix for those who run multilingual sites with more than 2 languages. Concurrently, editing 2 translations of any node may result in data loss for non-translatable fields. This saw a fix with this 8.4.4 release. More bug fixes and improvements included with this version can be found on Drupal.org in the release notes. Links to this and all of our other news items will be posted after the meetup in the meeting notes on our website at drupalatlantic.ca/meetups.
Jumping into the next news item is the fact that WebForm has entered a release candidate for 5.0 with 5.0 release candidate 1. There's some great news in the form space in Drupal. Jacob Rockowitz, the maintainer and builder of the popular WebForm module, on Christmas Day actually, that the Drupal 8 version of WebForm had reached a much awaited release candidate stage. The milestone also coincided with the 1-year anniversary of the first beta release for the module. Forward, this release stage begins the stabilization of key APIs and plugins, and draws the line in the sand where any new features that are not important functionality will be moved into other experimental or contrib modules. For those of you who are not familiar, web form is a module that allows administrators and managers to build flexible and extensible forms and surveys to capture and store information from users of Drupal sites. Go to web form at drupal.org/project/webform. And you can read more about Jacob's release candidate announcement in a great article about his what's next and his experience with open source contribution and maintenance at jrockowitz.com.
That's pretty cool stuff. Web form is a big module. I know a lot of sites use it. Almost every site that I've ever used it. It'd be finally good to see.
Any site that has forms on it, that's usually there.
It's kind of the key. Yeah, it's good to finally see it come into more stable, stable ways with the release candidate stage. I know the first few modules, or first few sites I did with Drupal 8 that used web forms had a bit of a shaky start with some of the support in it. So it'd be good to finally see that come out.
Yeah, for sure.
Onwards and upwards. DrupalCon Nashville is just around the corner. Coming up in April of this year, Drupal Association will be holding its 14th North American DrupalCon in Nashville, Tennessee, between April 9th and 13th of 2018. Unfortunately, you've missed the early bird pricing, which ended in January 12th, but if you're still considering going, you totally should, and it should be a very exciting experience. DrupalCon is one of the largest events, Drupal events of its kind, with over 3,200 people coming together to learn and meet people and grow Drupal. This year's con offers 15 tracks or subjects to interest any attendee, including project management, site building, DevOps, front-end development, back-end development, and so much more. There are a couple of brand new tracks this year, including community building, technical leadership, user experience, and content editorial. You can learn more about DrupalCon at events.drupal.org. Now, DrupalCon's kind of cool. I've been to a couple of them. I've been to two, exactly. I went to New Orleans and I went to Baltimore. And I could say for sure those were some pretty incredible experiences.
Yeah, I can imagine. For me, I've never made it to a DrupalCon, but I've done a couple of just straight PHP conferences, and I love meeting new people and being able to hear about all the latest news, and it really gets me excited and ready to go back to work and build something awesome. So getting to any conference is definitely important, I think, for any developer.
Yeah, definitely. If you can get to a couple. I don't think I'll be going to Nashville this year myself. There just isn't any budget for the extra conferences. But I might see if I can get to Drupal North this year, which is another Canadian conference that's held, which will be announced sometime, hopefully soon. Last year it was in Ottawa. It'll be interesting to see where they have it this year. And you get
Nice,
a lot of the Canadian folks that get to get into that. A lot of Canadian government folks too, from what I've heard.
Awesome. All right. So moving on to our next news item here is the fact that Drupal turned 17 on January 15th. If you want to head over to Dry's blog, that's probably the best place to see it. He's got a nice announcement there and a video about it. January 15th in 2001 was when he released the source code behind drop.org, and Drupal was born. What it looked like, we'll post a link in our show notes to go grab the source for Drupal 1.0, which is a great thing to look through. It's amazing how simple it was back then versus what it is now. So there's some interesting facts about Drupal today and how it's grown in the last 17 years. There's at least 190,000 sites running Drupal 8, up from 105,000 sites in January 20. Year growth, which is great to see the latest version getting so much adoption. 1,597 stable modules for Drupal 8, up again from 810 in January 2016, which is a 95% year-over-year growth. In 2017, there was close to 5,000 DrupalCon attendees, 41 Drupal camps held in 16 different countries last year, and 240 individual code contributors, a 28% increase compared to 2006. And there were 880 889 organizations that contributed code, which is a 26% increase compared to 2006. And there were 13 million visitors to Drupal.org in 2017. There were 76,374 instance hours for running automated tests, which was 9 years of continuous testing.
That's some pretty cool stats, actually. If you think about where Drupal was, I don't know if anybody imagined in the beginning that Drupal would grow to this level. And yeah, to look at things like the DrupalCon attendee statistics, I think that probably includes more than just DrupalCon US. It probably includes DrupalCon Asia and possibly DrupalCon Europe as well. But I think for the DrupalCon Baltimore, I think there was only about 3,000 people there. But either way, to get 5,000 people getting together is pretty sweet.
Yeah, that's amazing. There's so many developers worldwide that are. I'm sure there's many more that are doing Drupal, but to get that many out to a conference or to a DrupalCon is pretty crazy.
Yeah, and looking at the stable modules for Drupal 8 too, I think that probably goes back a little bit to a change that they made in Drupal.org with the module approval system. Historically, it was very difficult to get modules into Drupal.org's extend section, and there was a very rigid process for approvals to get it beyond essentially a sandbox mode. And I think at the beginning of 2017, they made that change that made it so that anybody could publish a module much more easily, and the review process was changed to make it more easy to bring stuff in, which I think was a big help there too.
For sure. I mean, the easier you can make to contribute, the more contributors you're going to get. So that's very important, obviously.
Yeah, and I think it's part of the reason, it's more difficult to get stuff in there, yes, but it kind of what distinguishes us from other groups like WordPress, for example, or even, I'm not sure about Joomla, but the WordPress ecosystem tends to be a bit of a mixed bag because it seems as though the review process is a little bit different or maybe not quite as stringent as Drupal's review and security process, which seems to cause maybe a little bit different of a experience when you start getting into security and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one thing I know Drupal definitely has an advantage is having the security review as part of some of the core and contributed modules.
Yeah. All right. So moving on, speaking about underlying technologies and fun stuff like that, some maybe not so good news. I'm not sure. It really depends on what your take on it is and how much work you have to do. But starting in March 6, 2019, Drupal 8 will require Drupal 7 minimum. So announced on the 23rd of January, core contributor XJM posted a new directive stating that in 1 year's time, on March 6th, 2019, Drupal 8 will drop all support for PHP 5.5 and 5.6. From that point forward, Drupal will require at minimum 7.0 and recommend at least 7.1. This information, though not entirely surprising, is a shot across the bow to anyone running Drupal that they need to be ready to upgrade their infrastructure or move to hosting that supports PHP 7. This isn't really that surprising also, considering Drupal 8 was heavily encouraged to be paired with PHP 7 over PHP 5. And most docs cite it, and the official Docker images, for example, all use either PHP 7.1 or 7.2 as a base. On top of which, PHP 5.5 reached an end of life in June 2016, and PHP 5.6, the final version of PHP 5, will end its life in December of this year. So I think it's kind of really a move for security and a lot of other things that Drupal kind of gets Drupal folks get their acts together and move on to the new and more stable PHP 7 stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I know there was, some huge performance improvements that come along with PHP 7 too. So if nothing else, that's one reason to make sure you're upgraded to the latest PHP.
And I think they're giving us enough time to really get it going. Like 2019, so it's a fair ways off, and it gives enough time for, I'm hoping, most folks that support Drupal sites and host Drupal sites to start considering their infrastructure and how it upgrades, and probably even may even motivate a few folks who are running Drupal 7 and Drupal 6 to consider upgrading to Drupal 8. Because, you know,
Yeah, for sure.
the Drupal 7 branch isn't dropping support for PHP 5 because, well, it really can't. You know, Drupal core, I believe, supports PHP 7, but the contrib space is a completely different experience. You don't really know what you're getting, and not everything runs, or at least the way you expect.
Yeah, for sure.
So that actually wraps it up for the news portions of the of that. And next month we'll do a few more. And like I said earlier on, we'll post the news links and that information on our show notes on our website at Drupal.org, or excuse me, DrupalAtlantic.ca/meetups. The big topic I think we're going to be getting into for this meetup comes around to what to do and how we're going to grow this going forward. I like the fact that we're going to be doing the online meetups because it brings more people in, and people don't necessarily have to consume the content live. They can watch it later on and contribute their feedback whenever they like and how they like. But I'd like to get some feedback from people who are participating to see where they'd like to go with it and what kind of information they'd like to see. So what do you think, Trevor, would bring more people in to grow this and to want to ask and throw some content and participate?
Well, I think one thing we discussed in the Halifax group was reaching out to universities or colleges around and seeing if we could do presentations on Drupal or a camp at their the university or the college to give information to the students and just so they're aware of Drupal and maybe they'll be interested in that and come out to the group even further after that.
Okay. Yeah, I think the community colleges is a big avenue because a lot of folks are probably trying to figure out what they want to do, and giving Drupal as an option, I think, is helpful there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure how NBCC works, but NSCC, I don't know that they do a lot of CMS type work or anything like that. It's more focused on the HTML, JavaScript, that kind of thing. So, or that Drupal's out there, I think would be a great idea.
Yeah. What do you think we could focus on for content, which would bring more people in?
I like the news, but I think also maybe as we're trying to do, get guests, get people who have knowledge in specific areas, specific modules that people are using on a regular basis, probably would help to attract people.
Yeah, I like that. Looks like we have a question in the chat, actually. John H. is asking, well, from our point of view, I guess, we're fairly familiar with Drupal 7. I think we would perhaps be interested in practical terms, at transitioning from 7 to 8. I think that's actually a very good topic. There's still a lot of people, and even I'll admit it, Drupal 8's a hard nut to crack if you're not used to it. We've done a few sites ourselves in Drupal 8, and the adjustment to the changes of how Drupal 8 and Drupal 7 compare to each other has been an uphill battle. A lot of how the site front end operates is basically the same. You still have your nodes, you still have your different entities, but under the hood, things are a little bit different.
Yeah, for sure. It's shifted more to an object-oriented, proper kind of approach, which I think is good for a lot of people. But people who have been doing Drupal for years definitely isn't quite as familiar.
Yeah, I mean, it's taken me a little while to get up to speed to really say I'm comfortable doing Drupal 8 sites. And as John H. is saying here in the chat, a sticking point for us was figuring out Twig and moving from the old download a zip file way of installing and updating over to using Composer. It was a little, I agree with that. Composer is a bit of a learning curve, especially. In our development process, we did automate Drupal 7. We were using Drush and make files to build the Drupal 7 sites and transporting configuration with things like the features module. So one big change you see in Drupal 8 is instead of using Drush to maintain module build-outs and running your make files and all that fun stuff, you're using Composer to scaffold your site. So it goes out, fetches all your modules, builds your file structure, and then you would run your other automation to do a site install. And then instead of using something like features to sync your content or your configuration in, you would use Drupal 8's new config management system, which uses a whole pile of YAML files, basically, to transport your site configuration between different environments. Which, for those who don't do that kind of an automation, sounds probably like I'm speaking some sort of Martian dialect, but from an ops perspective, it's kind of interesting. So it really changes how you deploy and makes you think a little bit differently, because things you could do in Drupal 7, which is may or may not have been, air quotes, the right way to do things, it still allows you to move stuff around between environments. Makes it a little bit different in Drupal 8. In Drupal 8, they kind of make you do things a little bit differently and follow the rules a little bit more in order to move stuff around. So there's certainly a lot there, and I think there's a lot of content we can do about how to build that experience for people who may be a little bit intimidated by Drupal 8.
Yeah, I think that would be a great, and I don't think we'd have a problem finding people to help with that. I know there's a work that would be interested in talking about that.
Yeah, and I think there's also a conversation, which I don't think a lot of people like to have, is when is it appropriate to go to Drupal 8 and when isn't it? Like, the thing about Drupal 7 is Drupal 7 isn't really going anywhere yet. It's going to be around until at least 2019. And, you know, does everybody need to go run out the door tomorrow and upgrade to Drupal 8? I mean, with the impending end of life of PHP 5, it's a bit of a motivating factor. But it also doesn't mean that, you know, December 31st, 2018, the PHP file just stopped working. But it does mean that it won't be getting any more security updates. So you have to kind of strike that balance about how much do I need to upgrade versus what's my security footprint going to be if I don't.
We run the one main Drupal 7 site that we have that we're looking at upgrading. We're already running on PHP 7. So there's that as well. You don't necessarily need to be running on PHP 5. You can do it incrementally a bit as well.
Yeah, I think it just really with Drupal 7 it requires more testing, because you don't really know for sure, like all those contrib modules, whether or not they support the Drupal 7 entirely. And at that point, it really becomes an exercise in, do we really need that module to do what
Absolutely.
we need to do?
Definitely a trade-off there.
So I think it really, you know, because a lot of folks want to stuff their sites with as much modules as possible. And, you know, I think it's another entire conversation about justification, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think, you know, thanks, John H., for the question. And yeah, I think we could probably do quite a bit on that transition. And definitely want to look at doing that for a couple of our next sessions. I think one of the other things we want to participate in, at least I do, every couple of months, Drupal puts out what's called the Global Training Days. So every, I think it's 2 or 3 months, they do a session where you can sign up. Everybody signs up to host an event about teaching and building with Drupal, and either they can be sprints or kind of tutorial type sessions, and we just bring together and talk Drupal, basically. That might be a nice banner to host some more kind of nuts and bolts conversations.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I think what we've done a little bit in the past is have people come to our meetups in Halifax. We've done this once or twice with issues they're having, specific issues, and maybe throw them out the day before, and we can sit down with them and work through it. Or, you know, if somebody's gone through the same issue, they can help them out that way as well, which seem to be pretty helpful for people.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's something we should definitely look into. Speaking of future meetups, we do have some pretty cool stuff happening. Like February, we're going to have a guest, actually. As soon as I find my notes on it, there we go. We have an exciting topic lined up for February. We'll have Mike Gifford, twitter.com/MGIFFORD, join us. And he'll be talking about Drupal in government and the Drupal Accessibility Initiative. So to kind of give you a little bit of background on who this guy is, if you're not familiar, I'll bring up his profile here. My screen. So Mike Gifford is the president of Open Concept Consulting, Drupal core accessibility maintainer, open source developer, and he spends a lot of time talking about evangelizing accessibility movement and how Drupal works in government and whatnot. So I think it'll be a really cool conversation, and we're going to put a call out for questions to ask him. So we're going to do it in kind of an interview format. So if you have anything you'd like to ask in the accessibility or Drupal in government sphere, feel free to throw it in the Meetup channel or send us an email at drupalatlantic@gmail.com, and we'll get them in to be asked. We don't have a date exactly lined up in February, but we'll be working that out and getting that announced as soon as we can. I think it's kind of cool because we have seemingly a surprising amount of folks in the government space in Atlantic Canada. I mean, we have some folks that work out of federal offices in New Brunswick. We have some folks who work out of Halifax, and with Halifax, Nova Scotia, with Nova Scotia standardizing on Drupal, which is kind of an interesting fact to hear. I think it's kind of a natural content fit to have in.
Yeah, absolutely. That's pretty good coincidence that we were able to line him up, especially since, for me at least, I just learned that we had so many people in Halifax doing Drupal with the government.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. I'm looking forward to it. Basically, one of the things, it's a call for content for us, that if you really do have something you'd like to kind of step up and talk to the group about, or ask any questions, or maybe something that you think everybody else should know related to Drupal, or even stuff related to Drupal, like some of the front-end concepts, or back-end development, or e-commerce, or site building, any of that stuff, reach out to us, and maybe you can help host the show and talk about what your experiences are. Yeah,
I mean, even if people have things they'd like to see presented, I think they could send us those, and we could try and throw it out to the group to see if there's anybody who's an expert in that would be willing to present. Because sometimes, I know for myself, I'm not the type of person who will think, oh, I did this thing and really wants to learn about that. I just kind of assume everybody else knows what I know. So if people want to throw out questions or things that they'd like to see covered, then that could give us at least ideas to see if there's anybody in the group that would be willing to help us cover that as a guest.
Yep, exactly. So unless anybody else has any questions, I think we're pretty much done for this one. Short and sweet, this one, but I think this will be a build for some pretty great stuff to come. As I said at the beginning, we'll have all of our notes from this episode on our website at drupalatlantic.ca/meetups. If you have any questions at all, feel free to follow and email us at drupalatlantic@gmail.com, or follow us on Twitter, send us a DM, or pop into our Slack. If you visit our homepage on the right-hand side, there's a little Slack widget. You can sign up or log in there and jump in and ask any of us a question, or talk to other Atlantic Canadian Drupalers. So with that, I think, Trevor, it was great hosting with you, and we'll
Something of
hopefully do
this.
this again.
Thanks, Mike.
All right. Take care, everybody, and keep on Drupaling.